Hi, IBD. I'm Meredith Heyman. This is Industry Insights. Thanks so much for joining me. One of the most popular social media platforms, TikTok, may soon disappear in the US. In March, the House voted to either ban the app or force its Chinese parent company ByteDance to sell it. Now, TikTok's fate is in the Senate's hands. Joining me to discuss the future of the app and what government regulation of social media could mean for the stock market is technology policy analyst Caitlin Chin Rothman. Caitlin is also a fellow at the for Strategic and International Studies. Caitlin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Caitlin, we got a lot to cover. This is not TikTok short form here. So let's go right into it. What's the current
Yeah.
state of a potential TikTok ban and the timing of a Senate vote?
So the House has recently passed a bill that would require TikTok to either divest to a US company or to leave the United States. Now, the Senate has not yet taken up this bill, but it is widely expected to. And President Biden has said that if the Senate also passes this bill, that he would sign it into law. So a lot does rest in the hands of the Senate right now, and it remains to be seen whether or not the Senate will pass the bill as well.
So, Caitlin, what are the accusations lawmakers have against TikTok and its parent company, ByteDance?
So there are several concerns. The first is that since TikTok collects very sensitive personal information from its users, this could include information like a person's geolocation, information about a person's browsing history on the TikTok app, as well as other information about a person's device or other identifiers. The concern is that if TikTok shares this information with its parent company ByteDance, which is based in China, and ByteDance could in turn share this information with the Chinese government. And then there's a second concern that the Chinese government could potentially control TikTok's algorithm to target propaganda to American users. Now, we haven't seen specific examples or specific public evidence of the Chinese government controlling TikTok like this in the past, but lawmakers are raising concerns that there are risks that this could happen in the future, especially due to Chinese national security laws that require companies based in China to assist the government with security matters.
And how is TikTok responding to the allegations or the concerns, at least?
TikTok has responded by saying that it has not shared US personal information with the Chinese government and would not do so in the future if asked. TikTok has also structured something that it's calling Project Texas, which is a plan to store all US personal information in the United States with data centers hosted by Oracle, which is a US company. Now, Project Texas is still being rolled out. TikTok has been negotiating with the US government for a little while on what Project Texas might look like. But in general, there's been very little public transparency into the specific nuances of this plan. And it seems as if Project Texas has not adequately addressed the concerns that many lawmakers have raised about data privacy and propaganda.
So, if TikTok is banned, where will its audiences go?
If TikTok is banned, the most immediate beneficiaries would likely be its main competitors, which is Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram, as well as YouTube and Snapchat. However, I would add that there's no immediate substitute for TikTok, at least in the short term. Other social media platforms occupy very different niches in the internet space. They have different cultures, different audiences, and users go to those social media platforms for different reasons. TikTok also has a very unique algorithm. Its For You algorithm, which it uses to target or recommend content to users based on their past viewing history. This algorithm is operates differently from Instagram or Meta's recommendation algorithm. So influencers have a very unique ability to reach new audiences on TikTok compared to other social media platforms. So it is possible that users could try to transport their platforms over to other apps, but in the short term at least, there's no direct substitute for what TikTok offers.
And what about the effect it will have, this potential ban, on some of TikTok's other business sectors, such as marketing and digital advertising?
So many marketers, influencers, and organizers have used TikTok in order to build a platform and to reach new audiences. So those individuals or those businesses would likely be the most affected by a TikTok ban in the short term. In the long term, it's also possible that a TikTok ban could have effects on other industries as well, especially if the United States banning TikTok also encourages other countries to ban apps that they also see as security risks. We've seen in the past, for example, when the US banned TikTok on government devices, France followed the US lead, but it didn't just ban TikTok, it also banned Netflix and Twitter on government devices. So if TikTok is banned in the United States, the question then leads to, well, what other companies might be affected, especially companies that want to operate in both the United States and in China.
TikTok is also a competitor in
Yeah.
terms of e-commerce, and in September, it opened its shopping tab. So if
Yeah.
TikTok goes away, how will other competitors similarly, I guess, benefit?
It is possible that in the short term, other e commerce competitors, so that could be Instagram, for example, or Amazon or Walmart, could see a short term boost in demand. In the long term, a TikTok ban will likely raise concerns for how other e commerce companies that also collect very sensitive amounts of data, which they use to target advertisements or which they could potentially transfer abroad. How a TikTok ban might set a precedent for the government to also either ban or impose regulations on companies that operate similarly to TikTok.
Now, TikTok isn't publicly
Yeah.
traded yet, but what would ramifications of this potential ban be for other social media stocks?
Yeah. In the short term, I would expect to see other social media stocks to rise. After all, a TikTok ban would likely benefit its main competitors, at least in the short term. However, in the long term, I would ask, if I were an investor, I would ask what would a TikTok ban mean for the future of social media regulation? Does a ban on TikTok mean that the US government is becoming tougher on social media companies? Might we expect to see more laws or more regulations targeting other companies that collect very similar types of personal information to TikTok and also have very strong influences over the content that people see? So it remains to be seen what will happen in the long term, but I do think that a TikTok ban would set a precedent for heavier regulation or more government intervention in the social media market in the future.
Now, what's the likelihood of private investors buying this company? There's been chatter around that.
Yeah. I mean, right now, about 60% of TikTok is controlled by private investors. And there have been talks about like a wealthy individual, for example, or a corporation potentially buying ByteDance ownership of the company. This, I would say, first of all, any investor that does purchase ByteDance's remaining stake will have to have a lot of resources. It'll have to be very wealthy because TikTok is one of the most valuable companies in the United States. It's significantly larger now than it was back in 2020 when President Trump first attempted to ban the app. And second, any investor is going to have a significant amount of risk tolerance because there is a good chance that the deal wouldn't go through, whether for legal reasons in the United States or legal reasons in China. So it is possible that TikTok will attract a lot of interest from investors just because of the value of the company and its user base and its database. However, the road to divestiture is not going to be a short or an easy one.
Right, right. And if TikTok does go under new ownership, what could this mean for some of its competitors like Meta and Snap?
Yeah. I mean, we've seen recently another social media company that was purchased by a private investor, a single individual. And I think one of the lessons learned from that, though, that is, if a company is sold to another person or another company, it doesn't always retain its original character. Running a social media company is very, very difficult. It's a very tricky regulatory space. And I would expect if TikTok were to be sold, I would expect to see the nature of the app change a lot, whether for better or for worse. And depending on that new ownership, depending on how TikTok is managed and run, which remains to be seen, that could mean either good things or bad things for its direct competitors like Facebook and Snapchat. So I actually do think that if TikTok were to be sold, at least in the short term, it would probably benefit Meta and Snapchat just because there's so much uncertainty and there's so much unpredictability unpredictability in how that transfer would shake out. But it's very, very difficult to tell at this point in time.
All right. And now some big picture. What
Yeah.
if TikTok is sold or banned? What
Yeah.
could this mean for the stock market at large?
If a TikTok were to be sold or banned, I don't know what kind of effect we would see in the short term. I think that would real or in the long term. I think that would really depend on what other regulations accompany this TikTok ban, as well as is this TikTok ban going to be a one-off ban, or does it signal a broader shift in US policy where the United States is creating more and more of a fracture or more of a division in cross-border data transfers and business between the United States and China. So if it turns out that this TikTok ban is a larger signal that US-China relations are worsening, or if it's a larger signal that the United States is taking more actions to cut off cross-border data flows around the world, I think in that case we would see a larger impact. But right now, it's just not clear whether this TikTok ban is a one-time initiative or if it's a signal of something larger.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're talking about government regulating social
Yeah.
media, what are those implications? It's not just TikTok being
Yeah.
affected, and there's online safety security measures that are also a big part of this.
Yeah, that's the big question. I mean, social media companies in the United States are among the most underregulated in the world. The US has not significantly updated its laws since the internet became popular, at least at a federal level. And as a result, we've seen many social media companies and many mobile apps in general actually build their business models around collecting and sharing personal information and then using that to target advertisements online. So if we do see the US government impose stronger boundaries on how technology companies collect and share personal information and how they use that to target advertisements, I would expect to see broad implications across the entire advertising industry because this is something that so many companies and so many mobile apps have built their business models around. Data is really the lifeblood of the internet. So, depending on which way the US Congress goes, this interest in TikTok and this concern about data privacy and content moderation could actually have very, very wide reaching ripple effects on the rest of the online industry.
And depending how this shakes out, is a
Yeah.
ban, even the potential of, talking about a ban, the most effective option?
I think that would depend on what the goal is. If the goal is to increase Americans' privacy, I don't think that a ban or even talking about a ban is the most effective option. Just because even though TikTok collects a lot of personal information, so do many, many other mobile apps across the industry. So even if TikTok no longer collects personal information, there are so many other ways in which foreign governments or in which non-state actors to potentially access US personal information. If the goal is to prevent propaganda from spreading, again, that wouldn't really stop if TikTok no longer operated in the United States. So I think if we were to evaluate the effectiveness of a TikTok ban, we first need to figure out, okay, what are the problems that we're aiming to solve?
All right, Caitlin. Well, we'll be watching. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Meredith Heyman. This is Industry Insights. Stay right here on IBD for more. Thanks for watching.